Good morning. I hope that you all are feeling well. Oh, I am just getting back in town from Puerto Rico and I'm feeling so in my body. I feel really connected to what I know needs to come next. And I feel a little bit more clear about what it is that I want to do to serve you all. So, I'm going to do a little bit of teaching today. And I'm going to use my Google random number generator like I always tell y'all to do. Get this clicking out of my ears. And we're going to start with book 2. Let me just tell y'all something. I reread this book while I was in Puerto Rico. And when I tell you by the end, I was weeping all over again. I was weeping just getting to the end and seeing what was just the journey. Let me start off. And so for those of you that don't know, I published my second book in the Return to Pleasure, a Return to Pleasure series. And forgive my missing nail on both hands, but this is coming back from travel with XL nails. But here's the first book that came out in 2022, 2/22/22. And this one is part 1, Reconnect, reclaiming the erotic as holy and integral to our aliveness after trauma. And then book 2 is release. Part 2 is release. And from grief to liberation, heal the past, reclaim the future, and disrupt timelines of generational sexual harm. That is book 2. So we're going to start off using book 2 today. And book 2 has, how many pages? 333 pages, I believe. Yes. So with our Google random number generator, we put in 1 through 333. And we're going to tap that 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 239 is the page it landed on. I don't have my regular glasses. I lost them, you all, so I have to use my outdoor glasses. 239. Let me get my tea. All right. 239. I'm gonna back up a page. That's always helpful. And something that you can do when you do this, the Google random, you can always go to the page that feels like it's drawing you from what's been called. But there's always a message on that particular page. Ooh, yes. Okay, I'm gonna go back 3 pages. I remember this passage in particular really definitely did something for me. It says, so there's a song and it's called I Told the Storm by Greg Quinn and the Joyful Noise. And it goes, I told the storm to pass. Storm, you won't last. Storm, go away. I command you to move today. And in fact, this storm, when God speaks, storm, you have to cease. That's what I told the storm. I told the storm to pass. Storm, you can't last. Go away. I command you to move today. Yes, okay. Storm, when God speaks, oh storm, you have to cease. That's what I told the storm. I grew up with this song sung in church and heard it on the radio every Sunday. Mama listened to it throughout the week, and you know what? I came to understand the storm as trauma experiences of deep loss, frustration, and pain that we sometimes encounter and couldn't get out of. And when we're facing the storm, a lot of times we feel powerless. We can feel weak and small, not knowing or feeling any certainty about the things changing. Part of our practice, or ritual, I guess, singing this song as an invocation of spirit is to remind us of the power of manifestation. It reminds us of the power of our words and the power of breaking chains that inherently inhibit us from realizing the fullness of love and promise in our lives. So are you willing to look at the experiences of your sexual journey, reclaim your sovereignty, and command the energy of the wind around you? To say, I command the circumstances to improve. I deserve there to be care and gentleness. I command that there be a new way. I crave that there is an open door. I command there to be something better than what is right there in front of me. I command myself to be free of the bondage of sexual shame. I command myself to release the things that have made me feel afraid and unsafe. I reclaim pleasure as my birthright. I reclaim healing as my divine path. I reclaim my body as my own. Do you feel able to activate this power? Quote, reclaiming the black body lights a radical path away from trauma and blame toward healing, self-acceptance, and ultimately joy. Alicia McCullough, Reclaiming the Black Body. Through investigating cycles of sexual harm, we can see how trauma can be passed down from one generation to another, and how harm can be disrupted by reclaiming ourselves. Alicia McCullough speaks to the idea that through reclamation of our whole self, we light a path forward that allows us to witness joy, possibility, and healing after trauma. Trauma is not the end of the story. Reclamation provides us a pathway to remembering our divinity, our wholeness, and the future that is promised to us. Now, listen here. Somatics is not a new thing. It has gone by different names, specifically within Black culture: praise and worship, juke joints, juke parties, ritual, divination, herbs, music, drumming, dancing, humming, being in nature, gathering, and a laying of hands. But we've always had access to these self-regulation tools that allow us to heal the body. As we know, the medical industrial complex and all of its nuances, along with how Black thought, Black culture, Black voices have been ripped from these spaces, as well as how Black people's bodies have been used as a playground and a battleground for so-called scientists to prove their findings. There's a lot of reasons for there to be a distinction between the practices that we've cultivated as Indigenous people versus the practice that we are learning now and articulating and utilizing within Western psychology. I think we must understand both. We must understand that these cultural practices existed long before we had the word psychology, long before we understood these experiences of disembodiment from that particular lens. It's not to say that the cultural practices weren't scientific. They were. They were based on qualitative research that people were doing within that space. They were looking at how people were responding. They were looking at the experiences that they had. They were sitting down and talking with them about the things that were on their heart. They were gathering together in community. They were breaking bread together and sharing meals as families, interwoven and interdependent upon one another. Within those spaces, they gathered the information that was needed. Those healing circles, those rituals, those prayers, and those worship practices became activated as a result of what was seen in the spirit and what could be seen in the physical. Our ancestors used these indigenous practices to call us back to the body in ways that allowed for healing and restoration. In the Messy Movement Lab, we understand the unresolved trauma can live not only in the body, but also in the spirit. An energetic field around us, communicated by our perception and responses to various experiences. These responses are deeply connected to our nervous system and how we relate to the world around us. Through somatic movement, we can become more aware of these responses, break old patterns, and create space for healing. I'm gonna take some tea. Oh yeah, that's good. What this passage I feel like speaks to so well is just how unresolved trauma can truly steal our aliveness. And when we don't have pathways to be able to sit with the pain that we're experiencing, to address it, to have ways to sort through it, it just starts to eat us alive. And I can most definitely attest to that in my own life, you know, going through major life changes and having access to practice and tools, but trauma can shrink our ability to want to access those spaces for regulation. So I think that you have to sit with your process and how long you stay in a particular space or energy or emotion. You have to learn that data, right? Because there's no right or wrong way to go about your healing process, but there is data to help you understand where you're stuck for long periods of time, where you have resistance, where you have no momentum, where you lose momentum, etc. And so I want you to be able to look back at your own experiences and not blame yourself for where you are, but take a reflective look at the way things played out so that you can understand how quickly or slowly does your body actually process some of the major things that are coming up, especially around your relationship to intimacy, eroticism, your body, sexuality, your relationships, etc. And so, like for myself, again, having access to the tools, having access to the knowledge, but the way in which the trauma is showing up in my body, shrinking my ability for logic and reasoning, shrinking my ability for being able to see a different possibility, and keeping me in a place where what feels most familiar, what feels most comfortable, what feels most safe is the protective layers of pain or rage or anger that I've built around myself in order to make sure that the things that hurt don't happen again. Or if they do continue to happen, they don't impact me in the same ways. And while that process may be effective to some degree, it's not a great long-term strategy because you just end up wearing yourself out emotionally, physically. I mean, health-wise, you can see the decline that your body has in holding so much weight and tension. And if you don't address it, it just gets worse. It doesn't go away if you ignore it, or if you try to play it off, you just stay in that angry space. Ask me how I know. It just continues to get worse, and you have to be able to be willing to take a look at what's going to shift the paradigm for you. one of the things that I see consistently in people coming into the messy movement practice is, you learn this tool, you learn this practice, you see that it's helpful, and then you kind of get in trouble. Something happens in your life, in relationship to your body, intimacy, etc., and your reaction or perception to it doesn't reflect this new tool. It's likely not, because you have to have time and consistency with applying a tool, making space for it, asking your nervous system to actually drift towards this thing versus away from it. And when we're locked into one of the trauma responses, we're not going to automatically drift into practices that make us feel safe. We're going to stay locked into whatever pattern feels most familiar to us in order to be able to keep ourselves contained. In order to keep ourselves contained in the way that makes sense for us. So when we're thinking about this idea of a paradigm shift, it is something that is progressively going to happen over time. And it also includes the spaces where you're feeling resistance to having those processes that will make you actually feel more alive, more connected, more in tune, more grounded, more connected to your sense of power. There's going to be resistance. There's going to be resistance to wanting to shift. And there's usually resistance to wanting to shift when there's not a vision on the other side. When you don't have clarity about where you're walking towards, you just feel like you're just walking and accepting whatever comes along the way. And it doesn't have to feel that way. We're thinking about coming back to a sense of aliveness within ourselves and using the tools and practices that can actually help the nervous system regulate itself, help the nervous system see a different perception, help the nervous system shift out of defense mode and into receptive mode, into acceptance, into surrender. I'm sitting with this question of, where are the places in your aliveness that you feel powerless? Where are the places in relationship to your aliveness that you feel powerless? And I guess the idea is, like, what does our aliveness include? That has to be perhaps the question before that. What does our aliveness even mean to us? Is our aliveness important enough to us to risk making a shift and to be willing to step into creator mode, not just in passive reception of whatever happens to us? And so that starts with looking at your circumstances around you and being able to command the chaos to end, for there to be peace, for there to be stillness, for there to be regeneration, and then for there to be a shift. And here, in commanding the energy around us, we begin to do what's necessary to get into preparation to shift the paradigm. Because the paradigm means that we're leaving behind old beliefs, the things that kept us safe, perhaps the communities that even, molded or shaped us up until that point. We're literally shifting perceptions to be able to step into a new timeline, a new reality. And in shifting the paradigm, we shift how the nervous system begins to perceive the world around us. And when we hold one paradigm as truth for whatever the circumstances are that we're navigating, if we stay in that truth, we likely can't shift to the next place or into the next vision that we are really holding for ourselves. And so there becomes resistance, there's fight, there's rage, there's anger, there's all of these emotions across the spectrum that can show up as resistance to us actually doing the necessary regulation work with our practices to be able to create a new vision for ourselves. And in creating a new vision, we accept that there are new beliefs that have to be cultivated in order for that space to actually thrive and not to be another place of dissension or contention or war within ourselves. And within that shifting of the paradigm, we again allow ourselves to reclaim the gifts, the wisdom, the energy of our ancestors, our spirit guides that have come before us, to be able to do that work that's necessary. Like Alicia McCullough was talking about, reclaiming the Black body, reclaiming our innate ingenuity, our innate wisdom, our innate practices that are meant to help us come back, call our spirits back into the body so that we can continue forward in doing the work that we know will cultivate a life of joy, a life of thriving. And within the paradigm shifting, what comes up is whatever processes or whatever traumas have not been resolved. And if those traumas continue to go unresolved, we stand in the middle of two worlds, between the paradigm of the old belief and the paradigm of the new belief. And if we're going to be able to get into the new belief, well, one, we can't avoid the middle section because it's just innate. You're traveling from one place to another. But that's the recognition of where the trauma stands. That's the recognition of what is activating the sense of disconnection or disembodiment. It's not being anchored in the paradigm or the timeline that you are truly wanting to be anchored into in order to make that shift in your life. We're going to keep talking about this more. And let me know what you think in the comments.